Yesterday, we learned about what makes an insect an insect. So what does make an insect an insect? We can usually tell that an animal is an insect by looking at its characteristics. Some of the characteristics that we talked about yesterday were that insects have three body parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Insects also have 6 legs, have exoskeletons, are invertebrates, and some of them have wings. Today, we are going to learn about the stages in the life cycle of an insect. Do you remember what a life cycle is? A life cycle is a cycle that all living things go through from birth to death. We have already learned about the life cycle of one insect, a butterfly. The butterfly life cycle starts with an egg, which hatches into a larva. The caterpillar will then create a chrysalis, and eventually an adult butterfly will emerge. In order for the butterfly to change forms, it has to go through a process called metamorphosis. Many other insects go through changes similar to a butterfly, and this is called complete metamorphosis. Other insects don't change quite as completely as a butterfly, and they go through stages called incomplete metamorphosis. Before we start our story today, we'll go over some of the vocabulary words that we will hear. One word that we will hear is progression. A progression is a series of connected actions or events. For example, the progression of the seasons from winter to spring to summer to fall and back to winter happen in a regular pattern. Another progression that happens in a regular pattern is the progression of the phases of the moon from new moon to full moon and back to a new moon again. Take a minute to think about something else that you know that happens in a progression. Molt. To molt means to shed old feathers, hair, skin, or shells to make way for new growth. For example, as a snake grows, it will molt, leaving behind the skin that it sheds. Larva. Larva is the immature stage of an insect's complete metamorphosis between egg and pupa, not resembling the adult insect. Pupa, the inactive, immature stage of an insect between larva and adult. Nymph, the immature stage of an insect that does not undergo a complete metamorphosis between egg and adult, resembling the adult insect. Hi boys and girls, it's time to meet one of the most fascinating insects on the planet. That's me. I'm a praying mantis, named for the way I hold my 2 front legs together as though I am praying. I might look like I am praying, but my incredibly fast front legs are designed to grab my food in the blink of an eye. I'm here to talk to you about the life stages of insects, how insects develop from birth to adult. Many insects undergo a complete change in shape and appearance. I'm sure that you're already familiar with how a caterpillar changes into a butterfly. The name of the process in which a caterpillar changes or morphs into a butterfly is called metamorphosis. Some insects, like the butterfly, pass through 4 stages in their life cycles: egg, larva, pupa, and adult. Each stage looks completely different from the next. The young never resemble or look like their parents, and almost always eat something entirely different. The female insect lays her eggs on a host plant. Remember, a host plant is a plant on which another organism lives. When the eggs hatch, the larvae that emerge look like worms. Different names are given to different insects in this worm-like stage, and for the butterfly, the larva stage is called a caterpillar. The picture in the top left is a picture of fly larva, also called a maggot. In the top right, there is a picture of a beetle larva, which is called a grub. The one on the bottom is the larva of butterflies and moths, and as you just heard, those are called caterpillars. Larvae feed and grow as quickly as they can. They also molt or shed their hard exoskeletons many different times as they grow, because the exoskeletons don't grow with them. In this way, insect larvae grow larger each time they molt until they are ready to change into adult insects. Once the larvae have eaten all that they can eat, they take a break. Sometimes people call this next stage a resting stage, but the larvae are hardly resting. A larva often spins a cocoon to protect itself during the pupa stage, when it will remain quite still for several weeks. You can see one of these cocoons in the image on the left. Inside this shell-like covering, the pupa transforms or changes into something that looks altogether different than before. Some insects have a soft cocoon for the pupa stage, and some, like the butterfly, have a harder case called a chrysalis. We can see a chrysalis on the right. If you have ever seen a butterfly emerge from its chrysalis, you know how extraordinary it is to watch the first flutter of its fully developed butterfly wings. Its wings were completely invisible before it disappeared into its seemingly magical chrysalis. It looks nothing like it did at any of its earlier stages. Scientists call this progression through 4 separate stages a complete metamorphosis. So remember, a progression is a series of connected events. So a complete metamorphosis is a progression of events. I can't argue with that, can you? The change is indeed complete. Butterflies, moths, beetles, and flies all undergo a complete metamorphosis. Not all insects change so completely. Some insects' young, like mine, are miniature or very small models of their parents after hatching. They do change, so they do experience a metamorphosis, but because it is not a complete change, scientists call it an incomplete metamorphosis. Just like you, the young start off as a smaller version of what they will end up being. Just as you started off as a baby person and are slowly growing into an adult person, some young insects slowly grow and change into an adult. A praying mantis goes through 3 life stages: egg, nymph, and adult. In autumn, the female mantis lays as many as 400 eggs inside an egg case attached to a plant. In spring, the eggs hatch. The tiny praying mantis babies emerge from the egg case. These brand new hatchlings, or nymphs, don't quite look like me, do they? A little bit later, the nymph resembles me more. The only thing it's missing is its wings. Even though you can't see them yet, there are tiny developing wing buds. These nymphs eat the same sorts of foods as I do as an adult praying mantis. Flies, aphids, moths, and other insects, just smaller. Let's take a close look at one of these nymphs. This is an image of a praying mantis nymph. Can you tell at this stage that it is an insect? Can you find its head? What about its thorax? How many legs are on the thorax? There are 6. What about wings? Can you see how many pairs of wings that it has? These ones are really tiny and they are hard to see, but there are two wing buds. Do you remember what the third section of an insect is called? Its abdomen. What about the outside skeleton of an insect? That is called an exoskeleton. The baby insect, or nymph, is born with an exoskeleton, but these hard, non-living coverings do not grow with the growing praying mantis nymph. As a nymph grows, its exoskeleton splits open. The nymph wriggles out to reveal softer skin, then can stretch and expand before it hardens. It molds its exoskeleton again and again, growing a new one as many as 10 times before it reaches adulthood. Remember, molt means to shed something, so it's shedding the exoskeleton. The nymph stage often lasts all summer long. After its final molt, each surviving praying mantis has a fully developed exoskeleton and full-grown wings like mine. Grasshoppers, crickets, and cockroaches belong to the group of insects that experience an incomplete metamorphosis, similar to this one. An insect's life cycle is quite short compared to yours. In some cases, it takes only a few weeks. Scientists believe that this is one reason there are so many insects on the planet. They are forever breeding and need to reproduce rapidly because they have lots of enemies. Not all insects, however, have short life cycles. The cicada looks a little like a grasshopper and is thought to have the longest life cycle of any insect, ranging from 2 to 17 years. The adult cicada lays her eggs on twigs. When the eggs hatch, the nymphs fall to the ground and burrow into the soil, searching for tree roots. They feed on the tree's sweet root sap. Cicadas undergo incomplete metamorphosis, so there is no pupal stage. The nymphs remain hidden beneath the ground, continuing to shed their exoskeletons. Once they are fully grown, they make their way to the surface again, shed their skin one last time, and emerge as winged adults. For some reason, all of the cicadas in an area emerge at once, either every 13 years or every 17 years. When the cicadas all emerge, they fly everywhere, and their calls are very loud. When hundreds of flying insects swarm through the air, their loud buzzing noises and the snapping of their wings make quite a loud noise. Next time, you will meet some other flying insects that may also travel in swarms. Can anyone guess what insects they might be? I will give you one clue. Buzz.
All right, my friends, today we talked about a very big word that describes the process of great change in the life cycle of an animal. What's that word? Metamorphosis. Today we learned that there are two different kinds of metamorphosis. There is a complete metamorphosis, which we've already talked about a little bit. A complete metamorphosis starts with an egg. The egg hatches as a larva, in this case a caterpillar, in the case of a butterfly. That larva eventually forms a pupa or a chrysalis, and it emerges as a butterfly. But today we talked about another kind of metamorphosis, an incomplete metamorphosis. In an incomplete metamorphosis, just like with the complete metamorphosis, it starts with an egg. After the egg, it goes through a stage called nymph, and then it becomes an adult. What's similar and what's different about complete and incomplete metamorphosis? Turn and tell your neighbor, your mom, your sister, whoever's helping you today, What is similar about these two, and what is different? My fingers can see those labels. There we go. All right, my friends, I've got another question for you. Today we learned that many insects will shed or molt their skin, their exoskeletons. Why do they do that? They do that so that they have more room to grow. Our bones are inside of us, so we can grow around our bones. But their bones are on the outside, their exoskeletons are on the outside. So when they start to grow bigger than the exoskeleton is, they're stuck and they can't grow anymore. Which is why they shed the exoskeleton and grow a new one. Next question, in which season or seasons of the year would you expect to see the most insects, and why? What do you think? I know that today we learned that many different types of insects hatch in the springtime. So I think we'd probably see more insects in the springtime than any other. Our last one is the change that takes place in the growth of human beings a complete or incomplete metamorphosis? Is it more like a complete or incomplete metamorphosis? Is the change that humans go through when they turn from a child to an adult more like a complete metamorphosis or an incomplete metamorphosis? I think we probably are more similar to an incomplete metamorphosis. In a complete metamorphosis, the baby doesn't look anything like the adult. It goes through a complete change. But in an incomplete metamorphosis, the baby looks like a smaller version of the adult. The infant resembles the parent. Not exactly the same, but you can tell that's the same creature. All right, my friends, go ahead and open up the PDF that's attached to this assignment, and I will tell you what to do. I am so excited for today's journal entry. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Today we are going to be working on some research. That means that you are going to dive in and learn more about insects on your own, and then you'll get to tell me what you learned. And I'm really excited to find out what you learned today. Before we do our research, we need to think of questions that we still have and want answers to, answers that we want to find in our research. On this first page of your journal today, I want you to think of at least 3 questions about insects that you still have. What are 3 things that you wonder about or wish you knew more about concerning insects? It might be more information about where they live or how they talk to each other. What questions do you still have? See if you can think of at least 3. If you have more than 3 questions, that's completely okay. Questions are always good. Questions are how we learn. When you have got at least 3 questions, I'm going to have you pause the video while you're working on those questions, writing or typing them on this journal page. When you have written at least 3 pages, then go ahead and unpause the video and I'll tell you what to do next. Go ahead and pause right now while you write down your questions. All right, welcome back. I hope you got at least 3 questions.
Now let's see if we can find some answers. In the Google assignment today in Google Classroom, there was a link to a website. So you had your video and your PDF with your assignment on it, and there was also a link to a website. Right now, I want you to click on the link to that website. That link should take you to this website right here. This website has a bunch of cool articles about different types of insects. We've got a dung beetle and a firefly, a honeybee and a ladybug, a praying mantis, and a termite or a stick insect. I want you to pick one of these insects, or two if you'd like to do more than one, that's completely fine. I want you to do some research, and I want you to see if you can learn anything new about these insects. See if you can answer the questions that you still had. So when you click on one of these insects, we'll click on the praying mantis here. It will show you some pictures of the praying mantis. He's a cool insect. And there's a short little article that will tell you a lot of cool information about the praying mantis. And if you decide you don't want to write about the praying mantis, you can go back and pick a different insect. Click on a different insect, is what I was trying to say. And again, there's some pictures and some information that might help you answer those questions that you still had about insects. When you have done your research, I want you to go back to your journal, and on the second page, I want you to write at least 3 new things that you've learned. If you can, I want you to answer your questions. Your new facts that you learned, if you have found the answers to your question, if that was one of the facts, make sure you write it. I want to see if you got any answers for your questions. While you're answering those questions, or if you didn't get the exact answers to your questions, and you just learned some cool new things, you can just write 3 new facts that you learned. While you're writing those facts or answering those questions, I want you to see if you can use some of the language that we've talked about insects. So see if you can talk about maybe metamorphosis, or exoskeletons, or abdomens or thoraxes. See if you can use some of the vocabulary we've talked about so far. When you are done with your research and your journal entry is all complete and you've told me all of the new things you've learned, go ahead and turn it in, and you are all finished with knowledge for today.